All right. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name's Jason Baker. I'm the brand development manager here at Weaver Street Market, and I'm excited to be joined tonight by a couple of guests who I'm going to introduce in just a moment. This is the first in what we hope is going to be a series of virtual events that we're going to be doing over the next several months, taking you a little bit behind the scenes about what it's like here at the co-op and talking about topics around cooperatives and food systems and a lot of cool stuff like that. We'd love your feedback about this event or other events like it you would like to see in the future. The email address on your screen right now, feedback@weaverstreetmarket.coop, is the easiest way to get in touch with us. Again, that's feedback@weaverstreetmarket.coop. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to have some time for a Q&A at the end tonight. We do have quite a few pre-submitted questions, but we're also taking live questions during the event. If you have a question, just put it in the chat and I'll be reading those out later in the evening as we get to the Q&A. But we're ready to move on to our speakers. So our speakers tonight are James Watts, who's our general manager here at Weaver Street Market, and Rink Dickinson, who's the president of Equal Exchange. Both of these individuals have been leaders in the space around cooperatives and natural food and fair trade for many decades now. We're so pleased to have them here this evening. Weaver Street Market and Equal Exchange have been partners since the 1980s, and they are our partners who help us bring you all of the many tropical fruits, the coffee, the chocolate, the teas, and all the other wonderful things that we're not able to source locally here in North Carolina, but helping you know that with every purchase, you're helping us maintain these long-term trade partnerships with the farmers around the world, and know that your contributions help make those relationships fair, ethical, and sustainable. And so with that, without any other further ado, I will turn things over to James and Rink. Thank you both for joining.
Thank you, Jason. And let me take this opportunity to both welcome our owners and the folks who are joining us tonight. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy lives to hear from us. But really, I just want to extend such a great welcome to my friend Rink. In many ways, Equal Exchange taught me what there was to know about fair trade, taught me about how fair trade in the developing world actually did exactly the amazing things that we see happening around co-ops here in North Carolina. And I can't tell you how humbled I am to actually get to share time with Rink tonight. So Rink, welcome. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you, James, and thank you to all the members of Weaver Street. We have always seen, there are very few food co-ops that came to life in the 80s, and Weaver Street and Equal Exchange are two of them. Right. And I think we differ by 2 years. But I think there's these deep similarities, a really strong commitment to co-ops, to workers. The fact that Weaver Street is a hybrid model that's 50% consumer and 50% worker is a beautiful thing. And it's something that's very unique. It should be much more widespread in the food co-op world, and it's really meaningful. Equal Exchange is a worker co-op hybrid in a different way. We're an alternative trade organization. So our goal is to get a higher price to small-scale farmers in Peru and Nicaragua and India and Sri Lanka, and to build a market for that in the US. But we structured ourselves, the three of us who started it came out of the food co-op movement, and we structured this as a worker co-op because we knew basically that was a really strong way to organize an organization in a workplace. So I'm so excited about Weaver Street taking that model, and it's a sign of the innovation you guys have always done. I think you're one of our deepest partners in the country, one of our largest customers, and really a model. So it's great to have this chance to be here with you guys.
So early on in our relationship, I actually got to share a car ride with the sales manager at Equal Exchange, and drove from North Carolina to Baltimore to a trade show, and it was so interesting because we talked about worker ownership on the way up there. We talked about how co-ops give back to the communities we serve, and I was talking all about the things I'd learned about Weaver Street Market being a part of a vibrant community in Carborough, North Carolina. And then by the end of the night, we were talking about all the vibrant community development that was happening in southern Mexico or in Nicaragua or in Colombia. And, the similarities to what our companies really wanted to accomplish in the world were really quite amazing. And by the end of that drive, that 5 hours together, I was convinced that that in my role at Weaver Street Market, that I wanted to make sure that we always had an amazingly strong relationship with Equal Exchange, that Equal Exchange demonstrated what it was that that we needed more of in the world, which was people making sure that the folks who actually produce the food, produce the products that we're bringing into the market here, actually are receiving benefit, and they make sure that that benefit is distributed first. One of the things that I was really amazed about was that in many cases, Equal Exchange was willing to pay for product long before it was produced. And I would really appreciate it if you could talk for a couple of minutes about why it is that Equal Exchange extends so much pre-production credits to the farmer co-ops that you work with.
Sure, that's a great question. And basically, in a lot of ways, what we're doing is another version of what Weaver Street and other food co-ops do when they buy from local producers, right? You're like, I'm going to show up. I'm going to be your best market. I'm going to take risk when others won't take risk. And I'm going to build a supply chain that allows you to be a farm here, right? So if you're trying to do that internationally, in the case of like coffee, there's one crop a year, right? So if you're in Central America or Mexico, you're going to start harvesting in February or March, maybe January, February, March. And right at that time, a bunch of people are going to come and try to buy coffee from you, paying you below market price, but offering you cash. Mm-hmm. And if you say, okay, well, I don't really have any cash right now, you're going to take that price, right? No matter how low it is. And so what a fair trade organization needs to do to have a chance to compete is show up at that time with money. We're going to pay you a higher price, but we're going to have alternative financiers take a piece of it, and the rest we're going to take from our own capital. And so here's 60% of what that container we're going to buy from you right now for you to go to put out to your members so that we can even get that container, so we can even build a supply chain. So that's really what that money is doing. And when you look at our finances like yours, people can go and look at them, right? What's the impact of what Weaver Street does or Equal does? Go look at our financials. You'll see that's a massive amount of capital for sales that are nice, but that ratio doesn't make sense. That's the reason. We need that capital to actually do what we do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so amazing. And the transformative effects of it, though, are truly amazing too. One of the things that you think, and one of the misconceptions that I had about, manufacturing and agricultural processes in the developing world is that they are somehow behind. And I have to say, one of the things that most amazed me when I actually toured coffee co-ops in southern Mexico with equal exchange back in the early 2000s was that these co-ops are using state-of-the-art equipment. They're using the best practices. They have farming practices that are really state-of-the-art from the beginning of the process right on through. Their organic practices are far above the standard. Their roasting practices are far above the standard. Their ability to sort and grade, they're using state-of-the-art equipment. And, a lot of that is funded through these, through the fair trade premiums that equal exchange provides. Can you, will you talk a little bit about the breadth of that trade and kind of, we talk a lot about coffee, and I talk a lot about coffee. Part of it is because I love equal exchange coffee. And the second reason that I talk about coffee is because it was my first relationship with equal exchange. It was what equal exchange's primary business was when we started. They operate a much more diversified group of supply chains now. Will you talk a little bit about the supply chains you support and the breadth of places you do that?
Absolutely. And let me get a little bit of coffee while I do it. This is my first cup of coffee of the day, honestly, and I'm loving it. So coffee is a real small farmer product, right? With a large group of co-ops in the producing countries. So it was the obvious first place that fair traders went when, like, let's build a more fair economy. Let's work with the coffee co-ops. And they're the strongest and most developed and have the most positive impact. And really Latin America is where most of that, it's happening in other places, but that's the bulk of it. Mm-hmm. Beyond coffee, if you think just fair trade system, it's a sort of system that is not even, right? So tea, equal exchange gets tea from India and from Sri Lanka. And the fair trade model is much, much weaker, right? So if you go and find a tea that has a fair trade seal on it, it's not really necessarily doing much. It's not really small scale farmers necessarily. They're not democratically organized. The pricing is different. The financing is different. Not in the case of equal exchange in tea, but tea in general. So you have the sliding scale of which models got popularized with a stronger standard. Coffee would be the highest. Bananas is actually pretty strong model as well, right? Mm-hmm. You guys when you get bananas, you're getting 40 pounds of bananas. Every one of those cases has $1 premium going right to the producer co-op. So that was a reason we basically wanted to support produce in the US for fair trade farmer co-ops. And we went with bananas, and we did it at great, great risk to the organization. We're like, we're going to put $400,000 into this organization that's not making money. We'd probably assume we're going to lose it all, but the model is strong enough. We have to try it. And due to the support of you guys and other stores like you, we've made it work, right? It's always hard, but we've made it work. So that's probably the second strongest in terms of impact. But we have mangoes. Maybe chocolate would be also equal with bananas. So if you look at cocoa products or chocolate bars, way more sophisticated supply chains. The manufacturing is extremely complex. Some of our product is the chocolate bars are going through Switzerland because that system is just so strong. You can't really reproduce what the Swiss have done in chocolate the way you can reproduce what the Dutch have done in coffee in the US. We can compete in coffee, not in chocolate. Those are some of the biggest ones, but we're always trying to ask ourselves, what else can we do? Just like I'm sure you guys are doing, how many more local products, what risk can you take? What can you actually deliver volume for somebody? Why don't you tell me some of your, biggest successes and on the local level or internationally, because I know you do that as well.
That's right. Well, I think our calling card was that we wanted to be an intersection point. And certainly very early on, Weaver Street Market worked with the local farmers at the local farmers markets around us and developed great relationship with local farmers. We recognized pretty quickly that we could tell some of those stories, but that deepening that relationship was a really important component of that. And one of the things that I'm most proud of that Weaver Street Market did here in the local community was partner with the Carolina Farm Stewardship Association in order to do a big farm tour. And, we've been doing that event now for over 25 years. And,
Awesome.
Those farm tours have brought thousands of people to farms all over this part of North Carolina, year after year after year. And we've, really deepened the relationships, and it's interesting to me because it's not entirely different than the work that we do with you and other co-ops through our co-op to co-op trade models. I think the other big thing that we've done more recently is 11, 12 years ago, we started working very closely with Argentinian wine producers, and in particular, La Riojana Co-op. And the Riojana brand has, blossomed in the United States in co-ops. And that was something that Weaver Street Market was fortunate enough to be able to do, to take a chance on and really say, we're going to get behind this. We're going to elevate its importance. We're going to go out there and advocate with our other co-op friends until we make this something that makes a difference.
You built that supply chain by being on both sides, right? And in that sense, you follow what Equal does, basically.
That's right. And I think that the corollary benefits of that are so many. I can remember, this is 7 or 8 years ago now, we had been working with La Riojana for a while, and the Riojana brand was very well understood in our store and in other co-ops all over the United States. And then just as an off chance statement in the conversation, the export director said, and we do a little bit with olive oil too. Yeah. And my ears immediately perked up because, a grocery guy is always interested in understanding more about the different areas of trade. And it wasn't very long before we were trying to bring that olive oil into the United States in volume. And Weaver Street Market has been buying olive oil from the La Riojana Co-op now, by the container for years. And I think when other retailers, especially retailers that are bigger than Weaver Street Market, hear me say at a conference or at a trade show or whatever, that Weaver Street Market is buying olive oil by the container,
right? They
think I'm crazy.
Correct.
I say, wait, how can a little co-op that's only doing $52 million a year afford to be able to buy olive oil by the container? I say, well, one, we think it's important. Two, we know the impact. We can see the impact in that community, and that reinforces our desire to make that happen and to continue that process. The La Riojana Co-op through fair trade premiums has provided running water in communities that didn't have it. They've built a secondary school in their growing region. They just recently started staffing the only hospital within a day's drive. Those are impacts that are real and that will pay dividends to community development in that part of Argentina for generations. And you can't help but be proud when you think that you had a small part in making that happen.
Right. I think it's really important for Weaver Street members and workers, right, and the
Mm-hmm.
community to know, like, just what you just demonstrated there. Like, you see a store, like, I know when Equal Exchange was getting started, and we would be talking to journalists, right, and say,
Mm-hmm.
who are your customers? We say, oh, we have all these food co-ops. They're really big. Yeah. I'm not interested in that. And then I would mention, yeah, here's a regional supermarket.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? They're a bad customer and they buy very little and they pretty much suck at it. Oh, that's what would be in the article, right? And so we walk around with images of success, right,
Mm-hmm.
which are reproduced. So we think of our natural foods co-op a certain way, but it's punching way, way, way above its weight class, right? Around
That's right.
impact for local farmers and impact for co-ops internationally. And I think that's just something we want people to know. And you guys are, because you're a co-op, because we're a co-op, we're not like a piece of real estate that can be bought and sold. And that's part of it too. You're
That's
going to be
right.
there buying that olive oil, right? You're going to be there buying Equal Exchange mangoes and Equal Exchange tea because you're committed to what we're committed to, and we work together and we talk about it, right? And if we do something, hey, Equal Exchange, you haven't done this part right, we're going to listen to you, right?
That's
Or
right.
likewise, if we say, we really need you to try to do this thing right now, and here's why, because we're in this together and we're not going anywhere. And that's incredibly important.
Yeah.
And I just want your members to really see that, because it's really true. Well, all the other stores are agglomerating and being bought and being sold, and that's a real problem.
That's right. That's right. And I think that the thing that you didn't address in that piece too, that is incredibly important, is that as co-ops work with each other and as Weaver Street Market works with Equal Exchange, we're constantly exchanging ideas about how to do what we do better, how to continue to collaborate more completely. In many respects, the reason that this conversation is happening tonight with Weaver Street Market owners is a part of that co-op to co-op relationship.
Yeah.
That's, I'm fortunate enough to actually have been involved in a lot of Equal Exchange's communication to their retail partners, but also to the folks who are their citizen consumers. And I really want us to spend a couple of minutes tonight talking about citizen consumers, because I think that's another way that we reinforce the interesting and amazing things that Weaver Street Market and Weaver Street Market's owners can do in relationship with Equal Exchange and the worker owners at Equal Exchange, because you've done a pretty amazing job at looking at models to reinforce working not only with other co-ops like Weaver Street Market or the Durham Co-op Market down the road, or Deep Roots in Greensboro, but also in working with each one of those co-ops directly between Equal Exchange and the co-op owners. So will you talk a little bit about citizen consumers and your work with that group of people?
Yeah, I would say, when fair trade burgeoned, right, all of a sudden you would have these supermarkets. Hey, what is this fair trade thing? Oh, I don't know who to buy it from. You're one of the few places. Let me go buy something from you, right? So you had these rising sales. We went from 10 to 20 million in 3 years, and from 20 to 30 in like 4 years. It's all great, right? Then you have this commodification of fair trade, just the way organic has been commodified. And you're like, well, we have this organization, we have farmers we're trying to buy from, we're trying to pay above market price. And not that many people in the market really actually support what we're doing, right? Some do,
Right.
food co-ops do, right? And we had a church network that we had built through innovation that was very, very meaningful. But that market, got harder too. And we realized essentially we are a hybrid co-op too. And we're like, just like you guys, we need essentially consumer members and deep commitment. And we already had it. But we realized if we didn't activate people and engage people more, that would get weaker, right? So we want to be autonomous enough that we could survive at scale. And scale is what you said about containers, right?
Right.
And bananas, you're 8 containers a week, 40,000 pounds of container. That's
Is that
scale.
right?
Yeah.
8 containers a week. That's impressive.
It is. And it's also scary, right? Because you're like, oh man, right? I'm going to make, whatever, 6%, hopefully, if I'm lucky, and unless I have problems. But to keep that happening, you need autonomy and deep commitment, right? So we're trying to go to people and organize them to say, if you show up in our world, you have open finances, you get to talk to all of the vice presidents, you get to talk to me, you get to learn from Todd, who's one of our vice presidents, what's going on in, Peru or Bolivia, what's going on with this co-op. We're going to do education. We're going to keep asking for you to invest in this, but you're going to see the return on the investment. If we don't do those things, our path is way, we can't compete on commercial terms, right? You have to be commercially viable, but you have to have a major difference and win on that. And I think it's very similar for you guys, right? You have to be strong enough commercially, but you win on who you actually are and what you are here to do. And the more our members, our citizen consumers, your members join our group, they'll be sharing this space with other people across the country who are all working on food justice issues, talking about consolidation, what can we do about it, and having a community together, just like you guys have a community. That's kind of some of the elements we're trying to build.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you're exactly right. We need to share our owners, and that's true at a very basic level, because honestly, we are a smaller segment of the market, but we also recognize that we are a committed segment of the market.
Right.
And if we build on that commitment to do right by every part of the chain that gets that product from that small farmer in Oaxaca or Chiapas all the way to the United States, then we make sure that farmer's life is improved by their commerce at the end of the day with Weaver Street Market and with Weaver Street Market's owners. So you, Weaver Street Market owners, every time you buy that bag of coffee and every time you pick up that bunch of bananas, you are impacting the lives of individuals. You're impacting the lives of farmers who, without that trade, will continue to have the market work against them, as opposed to actually do anything to help them improve the fortunes for their family, because these folks are going to get washed out in the market just the same way as Weaver Street Market would just get washed out in the market. Look, if it was only how we compete with Kroger, that's not going to do it. Harris Teeter is always going to be able to use Kroger's purchasing power to undercut us on price. Right. But they're never going to undercut us on impact in the local community.
Correct.
They're never going to be able to return $350,000 worth of Roundup dollars into the economy. And when you think about that $350,000 coming from Weaver Street Market's owners through Roundup, and you compare that to the billions and billions of dollars that Kroger through Harris Teeter is actually extracting from the North Carolina economy, it really matters. It makes a huge difference. I think that the values that we support while also trying to continue to be competitive and be a good value for the amazing products that we're able to put on the shelf is really important. And you know, that from my perspective is the art of being a successful co-op. It's making sure that we tell these stories more effectively. And that was really the reason that I wanted Equal Exchange to be the first vendor to Weaver Street Market that showed up in community with our owners through a chat like this. Because quite honestly, when you said that you see Weaver Street Market and the parallels between Weaver Street Market and Equal Exchange, I would say that I don't know of another organization that walks their values the way that Equal Exchange does. And my aspirations in the time that I am so fortunate to lead Weaver Street Market is that we will continue to move and walk in our values and demonstrate that we also can pick up that challenge and walk in our values in the way you do.
Thank you. And that feeling is very mutual. And I'm sitting here thinking, as we're talking Harris Teeter and Kroger, like one of the things our citizen consumers did is we showed up around, Albertsons Kroger merger. Yeah. And we asked people across the country, and they did, to write letters and talk to their congresspeople and talk to, the federal agencies that were saying yes or no to that merger, right? And so that form of consolidation is an extreme threat to the entire, if you want to talk a sustainable food system, all these behemoths,
that's right,
I believe ultimately have to be broken up, right? And it might take us another 20 years to get there, but and I get, if I'm sitting where Kroger's sitting, like, how do I compete with Walmart? Well, so we have to show up, do our economic job, and do our democracy job, have fun, have a community, and also show up in the other space and say, no, this is not, you're not going to get a functioning food system if you keep letting, ownership on Wall Street just extract from everybody. And that's, James, I think right. That's in our grocery time that we've both been doing this, that's a lot of what we've seen, right?
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely true. Yeah, and this is certainly that way where our owners demonstrate that they want to see those resources actually being regenerated in their communities as opposed to just being taken away and put into some rich stockholders' pockets. Yeah,
that's it
for sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, speaking of your members, do they want to? Should we see if we have any?
Yeah, I think this might be a great time for that. Jason, what questions have you got for us?
Yeah, we've got a few questions. We've got several that were pre-submitted, and just a reminder to anybody who's watching this live tonight, if you have a question that you'd like to ask, feel free to put it in the chat window, and I'll be gathering those as we go through the evening. And also just a quick reminder to anybody who joined late, if you missed the beginning of this and want to go back and watch it at a later time, this video will be available on the Weaver Street Market YouTube page, youtube.com/Weaver Street Market. I'm going to start with a kind of a broad question we had pre-submitted. Certainly the past few years have seen a lot of change in the overall economic and political landscape, both domestically and globally. What are your thoughts on how we continue to make co-op to co-op relationships able to grow and navigate and exert influence in a time where we're seeing more economic adversity and political instability?
Do you want to go first or second?
I was getting ready to ask you the same question. I think.
Go.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Rink.
I think, what's exciting about being here and having this conversation and a parallel group that James and I are involved in where we're trying to ask these sort of questions. I really think we need enough capital to have a chance to do some things, right? Every time we start talking a container of olive oil, container of bananas. But I also think we need to keep taking risk, right? So it's like, I see the risk that Weaver Street continuously is willing to take. And I know it's scary. And you guys probably know enough about some of the things we do, like, oh man. But that's what we need to do. And we're going to need to fail some of the time to succeed. Sure. Hopefully 60, 70% of the time we succeed. And so I think there's a massive potential for what you're talking about, Jason. If we have support from members, from citizen consumers, if we have capital models that allow people, we want to see a different world. And enough people have enough capital, if you could believe your dollars are making a difference, invested in these places. And if we, as leaders and managers and organizations, can keep being willing to place small and medium-sized bets, that's my first answer. And I see that there's an openness to that maybe wasn't there 10 years ago. I don't know if you feel that, James, or not.
I do, absolutely. And I think the other piece of it is we need to continue to tell this story. I mean, I think that part of what we see from our, especially from our newest owners, is that they have an incredible appetite for knowing more about what they're buying, about what they're supporting. And so I think if we can do a better job of matching information, both through mediums like this or our social media, along with the incredible in-store experiences, and then kind of make sure that we should, put those two together in ways that are more powerful. Because I think one of the challenges that all of us have is we all get caught up in doing what we're doing.
Correct.
And we often forget to talk to the very supporters who enable what we're doing. We're so busy solving problems. I know that as a co-op leader, it seems like I spend a lot of time solving problems instead of thinking about how do I make sure that the folks that are invested in Weaver Street Market know more about how their investment is enabling something special in the food system around them. I mean, the food system around them today is more and more global. That in some cases is by necessity. No matter what you might believe about global warming, North Carolina is not going to grow bananas. No. We're not going to grow avocados. Right. We have to depend on relationships that are more global in nature. And while we're doing that, if we can make sure that those stories are effectively told, then I think we can continue to win. I think that risk taking is something that is incredible, that it's part of the DNA at Equal Exchange.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. It's part of the DNA at Weaver Street Market. We've made bets that didn't necessarily pay off at points in the past. And we've had to go to our owners and say, these bets aren't paying off, but we need your ongoing support. I think that Equal Exchange has a pretty recent example of that in your recent merger with La Siembra. Folks that don't know, La Siembra is a Canadian cooperative, and Equal Exchange recently negotiated a merger with them. Rink, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, we've been a long-time alternative trade organization allies, sister co-ops. There in the alternative trade world, there's sort of the craft people and the food people, and then a group of the food people sort of have a worker co-op focus. So here we have like 5, 6, 7 alternative trade organizations who are trading internationally, but structured as worker co-ops. La Siembra and Equal have always been in that group. And for 2 decades, we've been like, well, it'd be really, maybe we should be together. Maybe we should merge, right? I mean, James, how many conversations have you and I had over, like every 9 months, you might have this kind of dreamy conversation that's actually makes sense, right? But then you go back and you don't do it because you don't have time. So we had those conversations. Basically, about 10 years ago, La Siembra was failing economically, was 97% acquired by a venture capitalist, right? And they would have wiped out the co-op. They would have kept the brand because that's the money's in the brand, right?
That's right.
And they would have profited on the brand, and you marched along, and Camino, which is the brand, would have been many, many places, but it would not have been the same organization, would not have had the impact on farmers, would not have had the democracy, would not take the risk to change the food system. We were able to intervene with La Siembra at the very last moment and show up. And because the investors said, no, we actually don't want to lose this. We're going to take way more risk to keep it a worker co-op alternative trade organization. And because Equal Exchange paid the venture capitalists $110,000, thank you very much for the pleasure of just ending the deal. We've been in a much closer alignment for years. And now at this last stage, we're fully integrated as of January. And Equal Exchange is an international worker co-op with Canadian members who have one vote just like I do, So it does feel like
It's beautiful.
A big accomplishment.
That's great. That's great. And the Camino brand in cocoa in Canada is meaningful and huge and successful. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, that's great. And does La Siembra actually co-pack Equal Exchange's cocoa?
No, they manage the co-packing of it.
They manage the co-packing. Yeah. Okay. I'm about to say I knew that they were involved in some fashion, but yeah, cool.
Yeah, those supply chains are really like we've been doing it together for years and years. So like
that's neat.
They're the people who are working with the co-packer there.
Very good. Very good. Jason, what else do our owners want to know?
Yeah, well, James, you did mention a little bit about even with climate change on the horizon, we're not going to be growing bananas in North Carolina anytime soon. But we did get a question talking a little bit about some of the environmental challenges of climate change and some of the related impacts like drought, challenges with flooding and irrigation and things like that. How does Equal Exchange's model help farmers adapt to these challenges, and how is Weaver Street Market supportive of that part of the equation?
I would say the crisis is extremely real, and I don't know of any group that's not having massive they're all experiencing it. They all know it, right? So it seems to be only in the United States that we have some number of people are like, no, there's nothing happening. Every farmer knows it. And it's getting worse, right? And when just what you said, there'll be massive floods, like right now in Darjeeling, meaning like 3 months ago, landslides, floods, wiping out of roads, wiping out of transport. And I would say Equal Exchange tries to show up with emergency money when we can. And sometimes we reach out to Weaver Street and other co-ops to say, hey, here's something where we really want some support on. But it's not nearly enough, right? That's kind of what I would report. So the issue is only getting more and more dire.
Yeah, and I think that the recent developments around the United States kind of refusing to honor commitments, long-made commitments to partners in the developing world will only, exacerbate the harm. We continue to see that, and it's interesting because I find myself in that role of like worrying, like. I eat a banana every morning. It's just part of my routine. And, and I read what's coming with disease pressure on bananas, and how, the variety of banana we all enjoy in the United States is very likely to go away as a viable food crop in the not so far distant future. And, and I think that, recognizing that those sorts of challenges will continue to be out there. When I was traveling with Equal Exchange in Central America and Southern Mexico, talking about problems in coffee growing, same thing, and all of these things, all of these disease pressures are hastened by a warming planet, for sure. No differently than we've experienced them in North Carolina the previous year.
Correct.
Exactly. So, what we're experiencing here is not different than what, farmers in Darjeeling are experiencing, or, in the mountain areas of Central America. True all around.
Completely true. Yeah. And there, we don't have a solution, right? But I think the responsibility is to see it and talk about it and show up when we can and try to engage. But it's a real challenge, right? But let's at least try to do our part. And
that's right.
And that's hard to understand how to do it, but let's try.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both. Next question, Rink, you talked a little bit about the governance model at Equal Exchange, and at Weaver Street Market we have a somewhat unusual model for a grocery co-op being a hybrid co-op that's jointly consumer and worker owned. I have a question about how can grocery co-ops, and I suppose grocery stores in general, become more democratic by including worker voices as part of the voting owners, and what would that mean for them?
James, I am, please go, but I will back you up 100% here.
That's right. So, I think the simplest way for me to put it is, in our model, right? I'm responsible to the owners through the board of directors. And the beautiful part of Weaver Street Market's model is that there are 2 worker owners who are elected on the board of directors at all times. And there are 2 consumer owners that are elected on the board of directors at all times. And that model reinforces that accountability to our owners in that way. because not only is it the responsibilities on that side, it's also the benefits on the other side. We want to make sure that how we present as an employer is
Yep.
To the benefit of food service, food sector, excuse me, I misspoke, but food sector workers that are often devalued, and we want to make sure that ownership, that co-op ownership where it is one share, one vote, is so important and such a huge juxtaposition to the rest of the retail food environment where, if you look at the largest food retailer in the United States, Walmart, largely controlled by one family, and that family controls the vote. And what they can't control through raw numbers, they control through control of the voting blocks that are held by, big institutions. And so, simple fact of the matter is that an employee working for Walmart, probably not getting living wages, especially the vast majority of them. And then you think about, well, and if they're fortunate enough to own any stock, does their stock actually give them any rights? Functionally, the sad answer is no. And I think that the truth is that at Weaver Street Market, that functionally worker owners have a different scale of rights. And hopefully they feel a different scale of or level of investment and what that means in terms of their control or their access.
I think I have two comments on the hybrid consumer worker model. One is the strongest worker co-op in the world is Mondragon. I have not followed the latest number, but I'm going to say they're 25 billion and a really powerful model and do a bunch of things, obviously, extremely well. And they built networks of co-investment, which is like, that's what we need to learn how to do better. Mm-hmm. But their grocery division is 50% consumer, 50% worker, right? Mm-hmm. So that is the model. What Weaver Street has done should be the model. And maybe I'll say in the food co-op sector in the US, all of our co-ops would be stronger if they adopted that model. And I would like to see more co-ops follow Weaver Street in that, because I think consumer members want that.
That's right.
And workers need that. And it's something we can, again, like, where can we compete and where can we not? Democracy should be what we're best at, right?
Right.
Let's have more democracy. Right. Let's see who wants to mimic that, Yeah. Not Amazon, not Walmart, not Stop and Shop, not Kroger. Like, that's part of what we're about.
That's right.
All right. Got another question here. We've talked a lot already about the kind of long history of both of these organizations, and I've heard plans for the next 20 years bantered about already. What does long-term really look like when we're talking about the cooperative movement, and both for what we're doing domestically on the retail side, and what does it look like in the practice with the farmer cooperatives that Equal Exchange works with?
It's such a hard time to start imagining, on some level we're doing that and we're committed to that, right? And I think that question is really a challenge. Mm-hmm. We're spending so much energy just on the survival level, all of us, right? And taking these risks that these two organizations do more than other organizations. We need to get way better at that. I think one way I'll try to address that or think about that is the fair trade model that Equal Exchange has been a leader in creating in the US has delivered really meaningful benefits to farmers and to coffee farmers. Again, you'd start there first. And still, and you could go see those benefits. More people are on the land, more people are getting a better price, more people have more control, and more people are sending their children to be educated to leave the land, right? And so that's a lot of us that, like, when we're engaging with our farmer partners, those are some of the questions we're asking. Is that the goal? No, that can't be the goal. We want somebody growing coffee. Where does this go if you're successful for another 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years, which is exactly what we're going to try very hard to do? We don't have an answer to that. It's almost like the climate change one. It's like, but I thank you for the challenge, and I think that's our job to try to answer it better. James, what would you say?
I, I think what I would say has a lot of parallels to that. And I think part of what we need as consumers of those products in the United States to recognize is that when we support the fair trade model, it's not different than supporting the farmers market model.
Exactly.
It's not different than supporting the community-owned food co-op that thinks it's impactful if they also work and try to spin off a housing co-op or other things. That the one of the bigger challenges that we have in the United States is that the co-op model is not as relevant in as many sectors. We have some sectors where the co-op model is relevant, and we need to make sure that we work more closely with the credit union models, with the electric co-ops, with other parts. But we also need to look at what's going on in the rest of the world where grocery co-ops, food co-ops are actually market leaders. And I think that grocery co-ops in the United States are very much thought leaders about the food. And now we have to learn the task of gaining market share again. I think that that's really the big challenge for a co-op like Weaver Street Market is how do we walk in our truth effectively, and how do we make sure that truth is communicated to the community around us in a way that actually has us gaining market share, right? Because if we can gain market share, even going just from the minuscule amount of the food dollar that we have in Orange County, that makes us a vibrant co-op, I might add.
Right.
1 percentage point more would make us successful beyond our wildest imagination. And we need to recognize that those steps are impactful, and we need to double down on making sure that we make them. I have friends who live in Durham, and they talk about, I feel bad if I don't come back to Hillsborough and spend, if I go into the Durham Co-op, it's like, why do you feel bad? Weaver Street Market's closest partnership here locally is the Durham Co-op. Of course, we want them to be successful with us. Every dollar that you spend there instead of the Whole Foods down the street is a win for the community. So ultimately, we want co-ops everywhere to succeed, and we want the co-ops in our community and around our community to succeed so that we all succeed and grow market share together.
That's got to be part of it. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, we are at the bottom of the hour. I've got one last real quick question for you both. So for any folks who were listening tonight and inspired by all of this, hopefully we'll see some new co-ops emerging. What would be your advice to somebody who's looking to get involved in the cooperative movement for the first time here in 2026?
I think my reaction is when Equal Exchange got started and we wrote our mission statement, it was like to demonstrate the viability of fair trade and worker co-ops. And for the first 20 years, like for the first 7 years, no one cared about either. It didn't matter. You were just out in the wilderness. Then fair trade became a thing, right? And so from like 98 to 2010, there was this leveraging of fair trade and then this commodification of it. I never thought at that point the worker co-op thing, like it didn't seem like anyone was following that model. That's not the case, right? In the last 7 years, there's more and more people jumping in and taking risk and building co-ops and talking co-ops, and that has really, really happened. And so I think jump in. I think there's a lot of space, and it's really exciting to see that.
That's right. That's right. I think that the thing that I would say is that not only is it true that we need more food co-ops, not only is it true that we need more worker-owned producer co-ops like Equal Exchange, not only is it, or fair trade co-ops like Equal Exchange, not only are those things true, it's also true that we need more housing co-ops. It's also true that we need more daycare co-ops. It's also true that there are sectors in the United States that are begging for democratic process. And we need to make sure that we think about how do shared economics and shared community actually, work. And, what we're doing right now tonight is this shared knowledge piece. It is making sure that we participate with our owners. The more that those models can be pushed into other parts of your life, the richer your life can become in that way. So, our job is to proselytize the work that we're doing together, and I hope we did a good job of that tonight, but it's also to proselytize the process of cooperation. We want you to know that this process can lend itself to a wide variety of human endeavor.
And that requires taking some risk and having faith, and that's a really powerful thing to build on and develop.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Rink, thank you.
Thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure hearing from you both this evening. I do want to just remind folks who are catching us here at the end, if you want to rewatch any portion of this, the entire video will be available on the Weaver Street Market YouTube page at youtube.com/Weaver Street Market. You can also learn more about Weaver Street Market at weaverstreetmarket.coop, and you can learn more about Equal Exchange at equalexchange.coop. I love those .coop domains. They're always fun, and for folks who when in doubt, there's always a search engine that can find them if you're not sure whether this is dash and things like that. Big thank you to Rink and James for some really thoughtful comments tonight. We do hope to continue this series of conversations around co-ops and fair trade and all the wonderful things that they bring to all the way to your table at home. And so thank you at home for joining us tonight. And again, thanks, James and Rink.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Rink. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.